Just want to see if my audio is working.
Yes, we hear you, April.
Perfect. Perfect. And I will need the ability to share my screen. Just to give you a heads up.
You and Mark, I'll go ahead and promote you.
Hi, Cammie. As we get up to 6 o'clock here, I'll look to you to let me know when we're ready to go. Cindy, or I'm sorry, Cammie, are we looking ready to roll?
Yes, we should be good to go.
Very good. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. And tonight we'll have Cammie Garcia clerking for us. Our clerk, Cindy Jafopoulos, will be in support. But just so folks on the council know that Cammie will be our clerk this evening. And we'll begin with the reading of our remote access instructions and Spanish language interpretation information.
Okay, in tonight's meeting, to participate in public comment by phone, please dial 669-900-6833, and at the prompt, enter 886-3426-4200, and then press pound. And during public comment, you can press *9 to speak.
And we have information on the Spanish language.
Sorry about that. I'll just go ahead and read it aloud. It's not letting me. Tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation. To access the interpretation, you will need to use the Zoom application from either your cell phone, tablet, or computer. Instructions on how to use the Zoom app are located in English and Spanish on the agenda posted on the city's website. Once you join the meeting from the Zoom application, you will see a small globe at the bottom or top of your screen. Click on the globe and you will be able to access the live interpretation. Marcy and Claudia are our interpreters for this evening.
Thank you very much. So we'll move now to our Pledge of Allegiance. If folks would mute their microphones and place your hand on your heart and follow with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll move now to our roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Here.
Councilmember Chateau,
Here.
Councilmember Hardy,
Here.
and Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Thank you. And so we're now at our adoption of the agenda. Cammie, is the agenda tonight? Are there any updates on it?
No updates will be as presented.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
and Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Thank you. So we'll move now to our public forum. This is where members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public forum. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Is there any public comment at this time?
There is no public comment at this time.
Thank you. So we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to our reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. This is our reports by staff and or council members on items of general interest. Brief questions also for clarification may be posed and answered, and council members may request that items be placed on a future agenda, except under certain circumstances. The Brown Act prohibits any other discussion or action by the city council. So we'll start with our city staff, and I'll begin with our city attorney.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I have no report tonight.
Thank you. And we'll move to our city manager.
Good evening. Just a few updates. At the last council meeting, I indicated that we would hear a presentation by the County Public Health Officer, Dr. Relucio, this evening. Unfortunately, we've had to reschedule that. That will be held at the next council meeting on August 24th. And in terms of COVID, just a word that the County of Napa has now mandated masks indoors. And so that applies to all of our businesses downtown. And while that has occurred, and we have, at the prior meeting, I indicated the numbers of cases were increasing, there appears to be some hope near term that those numbers will begin to change. And we'll learn more about that in 2 weeks from Dr. Relucio. In terms of a couple of other items, just briefly, the Napa Valley College Upper Valley campus, we have signed that lease, and where we are with the transition of the city hall and the police station to the Upper Valley campus is we're in a space planning phase and designing the tenant improvements, and we've submitted a request to have those plans reviewed by the Division of State Architects. This is a process that's needed because the tenant improvements exceed $100,000. So we have scheduled that review beginning in September, and there's a placeholder now that's been secured. So we have a staff committee that's working with department directors associated with the various departments that will transition to the new building. And I'll continue to report on updates on the transition to Napa Valley College Upper Valley campus as we hit milestones. And then finally, we held a water conservation workshop on Saturday, and I want to thank our Public Works Director, Mark Rincon, and our Director of Administrative Services, April Mitz, for assisting me with that. We had about 20 people. I think we answered a lot of questions that were helpful, and I think the feedback that we received was positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prestridge. I'm seeing a question from Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Just one quick question, City Manager. Were there any, first of all, congrats on getting the lease signed. Were there any material changes to the lease since the last time the council saw it?
No material changes. I think what's really changing for us is just making sure that how we fit into the building. So the configuration has allowed a couple of different nuances, and every time we see the building, it helps us think through the space planning efforts, how the departments will work together. But I think what's emerging is a really exciting layout that will take most of our city staff to that building and create some energy and efficiencies for not only the city staff, but the public as well.
That's terrific. It's going to be super exciting to get over there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move now to our finance director. Any reports from our finance director?
Yes, so there's a few things I would like to share. So the first is last Friday, the Water Advisory Board, they did meet and they did adopt some objective criteria for determining penalty waivers that are caused by leaks. So we do have that. I'm in the final stages of getting everything solidified, and I'm hoping after the council meeting tonight that I will actually get that on our website. The next thing that I would like to do is share my screen. So can everybody see the website that's up right now? I'll look for a nod. Okay. So we did update the water emergency page. So as we're going through this, we're getting more and more feedback, more and more information. So we're trying to update things as they come to us. So now from the home page, you can either click on the water emergency page, and now we have a special designated page. In the past, it was actually done through the Public Works Department page, and now we have our own page. So what you can do is you can scroll down, and this will look exactly the same that it always had, with just new information being added to it. But what we did is we took each of these headers and we did them as quick tabs over here. So if you just want to know about your water exception permit, you can just click right there. If you want to see what resources are out there, you can click on resources, so it will just take you to that portion of the page. So we are very excited that we updated it. And again, as we get more and more information, and if anybody hears anything or has any suggestions, we definitely want them to reach out to us so we can update it and make it as user-friendly as possible. I see Councilmember Hall. I don't know if you want to ask a question on that topic before I move on to the next.
Sorry, I will just email you afterwards, April. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the other thing that I wanted to provide an update, we do have the July usage information. And so we'll be touching base on that later on in a different, an actual agenda item. But we are planning on getting the letters out by the end of the week to all customers that will tell them whether they met their target or they didn't meet their target. We're in the final stages of scrubbing and working with Raftelis on the final numbers. And then the last thing, which I'm very excited about to let everybody know, is that we were recently notified by GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, that we did receive what they consider the Triple Crown in their awards of excellence. So in order to get the Triple Crown, it does mean you have to receive your Outstanding Budgeting Award, an Award of Excellence for Financial Reporting, and also Award of Excellence for the PAFR that we put together, which is the Popular Annual Financial Report. And I do want to say a big thank you to Mandy Kellogg, who is the Assistant Admin Services Director, who is in the meeting tonight, because she has done a lot of work on all three of these documents, and getting us to actually receive the Triple Crown was very exciting. So I wanted to let the council know, staff members know, as well as the public. And that is my update.
Thank you for that report, and that's really, really good. Good to hear in terms of getting those accolades for the work. So thank you. We'll move on now to our city clerk.
Nothing to report.
And we'll move now to our public works.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I will be reporting it further on the agenda on the wastewater treatment plant update and also the water supply outlook. Nothing further.
Very good. Thank you. We'll move now to planning and building.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have nothing to report.
Very good. And our parks and recreation.
Good evening, Mayor. We wrapped up a very successful summer of Adventure Day Camp. We had 41 participants, and that's up from 15 in 2019. The reason for that, I think, is not only did parents want a camp for their kids to be in, but we operated in 3 cohorts that allowed the kids to stay physically distanced and continue to wear their mask during the camp. We also had some very popular martial arts and tennis camps. So our summer program, while it's for kids, is winding down. It's been a great summer for them. We are currently underway with registration for U6, U8 soccer, but we're hoping to wrap that up this week. So if any parents out there want to get their kids registered, they should call the office or send us an email. Next Wednesday on August 18th, there'll be the Adult Softball Championship. And that'll get started around 7:45 with the consolation game starting at 6:30. Bocce leagues still have about 1 month to go, but people are out there and enjoying bocce. And if you want to see what it means, the impact that recreation can have on a community, go out and watch bocce on any night of the week, with the exception of Saturday. You will see a ton of people out there socializing, having fun, having fellowship. It's just a great time. And then fall registration for bocce will get underway the week of August 23rd. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the whole Parks and Rec department for that work and really helping our community rebond after such a challenging time with COVID. It's meant a lot over the last summer. So thank you.
I will tell the other staff person you said thank you.
Thank you. So then we'll move to our police and fire. And seeing no representative here this evening, we will move to our council members. Councilmember Hall.
No update for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I'll give a quick update on the voting process for the UVWMA. So that's our Waste Management for Upper Valley JPA, because that came up last time. So in terms of voting, I found out nobody on the other councils or the board talks about the vote ahead of time. And the rate changes have happened every June for 37 years. That's how it's been. We already know the increase now, what it's going to be in year 2 or 3, unless there's a special review for rates. So every council is different on how they handle the committee reports. We've seen an informal process with ours where sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. So my suggestion is that if the majority of the council wants to have different norms for how we do it, let's put it on an agenda item. So it's the same for all of our reports and we know what the expectations are and we can talk about it.
Yes, I'm certainly supportive of that. If we get a system for reporting back from our committees, I think that's excellent. So we'll move then to Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. I do have an agenda item to request. I'd like to see the comments we received a couple weeks ago from Mark Smithers and Tom Belt, which included suggestions on messaging and recommendations to our non-residential water users. I'd like to see that on a future agenda, hopefully the next one, so that we can discuss the suggestions and maybe give some direction to staff. Thank you.
And that is something that I'm supportive of. I was going to bring it up as we discuss water a little bit later, but having a sort of a uniform tool in terms of messaging that we can all go out with these next 3 months, certainly for sure, are going to be challenging in helping everybody stay on board with our conservation. So I'm certainly in support of that kind of uniform messaging. And Vice Mayor Doring.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Just briefly, the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee met last week to review a draft of an integrated pest management policy for the city. And this would cover city-owned properties or city-controlled properties, not our citizens' properties. It was a robust discussion after a great presentation by Priya Nixon and Carlos Uribe. A lot of good participation by the committee. I was very proud of our committee, did a lot of work and invested a lot of time. In particular, a shout out to Maddie Chandler, did a lot of background work and asked a lot of hard questions and pushed the committee, I should say, to make it better. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm not exactly sure what the process is in terms of how that winds its way up to the council, but it would be something good for the council to see. If my recollection serves me, I believe that there is a link to the draft policy on the city manager's weekly update, the last weekly update for the city. And there are going to be changes made to that draft. But so that's all I have to report right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just have a few things. It's back to school now. And so with more kids out walking, biking, urging the community to be safe driving. It's okay to go slower and work together to keep this a safer environment for our pedestrians, bikers, kids going to school, seniors, etc. So keeping the speed down as we get into the school season, very important. Also want to keep reminding the community about emergency preparedness, having go bags ready, having a family plan, and really understanding the circumstances by which you're ready for anything that comes up. So I want to keep encouraging that. As we get into later this week, I'll be attending the Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee, and then next week, the County Flood Board. So we'll get more information about our water, groundwater, and also as we look towards resources that we're discussing countywide. So I'll have more information at the next county meeting on those two aspects. And then I want to just point out that in September 26th, I'll have more information on, there's a Drive Electric event that's going to be in Napa with vehicles of all kinds, electric vehicles. And one of the things I'm really trying to encourage is getting some electric tractor companies there. So that's going to be in September the 26th, and I'll have more information as we get into further meetings. So that's it for me. We'll get into the water issues, but in case anybody's just on for the beginning, I want to hold up this sign. Gold is the new green. These are available at City Hall, and that helps us as we get over these next few months and really promoting the consistency in our conservation. So with that, I will move to our presentations and public recognition. Seeing none, we'll go to staff briefings and go to our COVID-19 briefing with our city manager.
So I really did jump the gun on the COVID-19 presentation. The only change is a masking requirement now in Napa County, and we will receive a presentation from Dr. Relucio at our next council meeting. Happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Any questions from council? Thank you. And it is important that folks know that we're not all the way through this, so we have to stay focused. We have a lot of things going on, but that is very important. We keep that focus. So with that, we'll move now to our 8.2. This is our wastewater plant update with our Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Yes, just to briefly summarize, the design phase is over with the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. It's becoming a resource plant as well. So we're kind of changing the name a little bit, but in any event, we have a full set of design plans, specifications, and an engineer's estimate for this project ready to take to bid. However, we're still waiting for USDA to I guess, give us the loan, sanctify the loan, whatever they do. Hopefully we'll be back next council meeting with an agreement in hand for its approval. Barring any delays, we should fully execute the agreement by late August, early September. And then we'll go to advertise the project. We'll have a pre-bid site walk mid-September. By mid-October, we'll have the bids will be due in a 6-week bidding period. In 6 weeks, because it's a complicated project, we want to give our contractors enough time to carefully price the project. And then late October, we should be reviewing the bids, and by mid-November, take the construction contract back to council. So we're looking at a mid-November back to council with a construction contract. And then in November, December, and January, we may have some interim financing that the city will carry while the loan is being processed by the USDA. But I think April can speak to that if there are any questions. And then hopefully early December, we will issue a notice to proceed to the contractor to initiate construction. That's a summary of the bidding phase and initiating the construction. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rincon. Approximately how long will the entire project take? Is this 3 to 4 years in essence?
Well, once construction starts, I'd expect it to take about, well, I don't have the engineer's estimate in front of me, but I don't believe it's a 18-month construction period with a substantial punch list thereafter, but substantial completion in 18 months. Don't hold my feet to the fire if it doesn't happen in 18 months, but that's our goal.
Okay, and then one follow-up. I know you've been with us for, I don't know, 17 days or something. So I was just wondering if you, when you have a chance, would you mind seeing if you can learn, or maybe you know already, how much, what sort of capacity we might be able to generate in terms of usable treated water for irrigation purposes or parks or fields, et cetera?
Correct. All the wastewater will be treated to this higher standard. So essentially what's coming out of the wastewater treatment plant today will be the resource available tomorrow once the new plant is up and running. However, getting it to the users is going to be the next phase for this project, because at that point we will initiate projects for various reuse, and that's yet to be determined. Again, the plumbing has to be put in place, flow station has to be put in place, et cetera. There's a lot of possibilities here.
Okay. Any idea off the top of your head how much wastewater we're creating today out of the plant?
I don't have that in front of me. I will
Okay.
get that to you though.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you, Mr. Rincon. As you know, we're under a cease and desist order. I'm just wondering if the city staff is in communication with the state and making sure that we are proceeding along their timelines. Thank you.
Okay, I can answer that, and I think we'll take the same approach that we did with the York Creek Dam project. When we show that we're in bid and we're awarding a contract, we'll ask them to suspend those penalties and hopefully receive some relief from that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rincon, thank you very much for that report. That's a project that we've been focused on for a long time, and glad to see moving forward well here. So thank you very much for your focus on it. Okay, with that, we'll move to our consent items. This is where members of the council or public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. So tonight we have, and folks can put a hand up if they'd like me to pull one. I'll just go through the numbers. 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, and seeing no hands, I'll then ask for a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
So moved.
And a second.
And I'm just going to note that it says on the special council minutes of 7:13 that I recuse myself. So when I'm voting on it, I'm just voting that I recuse myself, not on the actual minutes.
I'll just check. Ethan and Mr. Walsh, that sounds adequate in terms of what we need to do?
I think that's fine.
Very good. Thank you. And so we have a second?
I moved the item.
Yeah, I second.
Okay.
A roll call, please.
Okay. Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hall.
Yes.
Okay, very good. We'll
Mr.
now
Mayor?
move to item, oh, yes. Cindy?
Just a question for the city attorney. Should we go ahead and have a motion separately for the 7:13 minutes, or since Anna's recusing from approving those minutes?
No,
Or are we okay
we
with-
don't need a separate one.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, very, very good. We'll now move to our item 11.1. This is discussion and direction regarding analysis of select non-residential water customer categories, churches, cemeteries, city schools. And this is our city manager, Mark Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. And tonight we're bringing you back some requested information about select non-residential customer categories, for example, churches, cemeteries, which we've grouped together, city accounts, as well as schools. And in the staff report, we've presented some conceptual application of a conceptual adjustment to a water penalty, so that you were able to see among 51 accounts how that would play out if some of those conservation targets were different. We have run numbers for different configurations, like 15% and 20% as well. I will note that there were penalties applied to 5 of the accounts that did exceed the conservation requirement because of a leak. And so some of those numbers were pretty hefty on the leak side, but we did remove those from the analysis just to present this in more context in terms of these 51 accounts. But this afternoon, we've been continuing to refine analysis, and we're going to share with you some additional refinement of the distinction between the residential and the non-residential conservation. And the news I want to share with you today is that the conservation numbers that we as a community achieved in June were good, and they're even better now. The July numbers are exceeding 30%. We're going to talk about how that unfolds, and I think the takeaway is that the conservation is absolutely occurring. It's occurring on the residential side as well as the non-residential side. We're going to look at those numbers. It's going to be very important that we sustain that conservation effort through the winter. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that we have a wet, rainy season this year. We're going to share some data with you later tonight on the next item that shows you how we're forecasting looking forward. But before we do that, we want to present to you some data on how this residential, and particularly it's really a deep dive on the non-residential customer classes and what's happened in June of 2021 versus the 3-year average, and July 2021 versus the 3-year average. So I think April or Mandy will be sharing their screen, and I'm going to walk us through a little bit of that. And I'm going to also invite April and Mandy to add any clarifying remarks to this data, because this is new data that we shared this afternoon. So what you see here is on the left column, we're looking first at the June water conservation. So what we have is both the non-residential, which is the first section here, the commercial general, the industrial, the hotels, the library, schools, the churches, and the city-owned buildings. And we have what is the 3-year average. This is the conservation target that each of these accounts would need to fall below. And then the actual usage in June of 2021 for each of these, and the corresponding reduction in water usage or increase. And we will point out, and we have a footnote here on the churches. One of the churches experienced a fairly significant leak in the month of June 2021. And so the leak has been fixed and resolved today, and you'll see that number change. The good news is when you look at the total consumption, typically on that 3-year average, it's very low. It's 137 on average, and 544 was an anomaly, but it is the smallest usage category of the various non-residential categories that we've identified here. So in June of 2021, the non-residential conservation was achieving approximately a 17% conservation relative to that 3-year average. It was even higher when we contrast it to the prior year. But then we also have shown you here what the residential classification conservation was from the prior year, and it was just about the same. So 18.43% for the residential, almost 17% for the non-residential categories. And we're going to now scroll down to the July data. And if I can direct you to the bottom right of that first section, that 35.73%, that was approaching 17% last month. This month, it's approaching 36% on the non-residential. So you're seeing figures of 25% to, we'll skip the city-owned buildings. They're off the chart in terms of conservation, but 25 to 56%, depending on the classification that we have noted here. You'll see that the church's use went down, the church category went down, and I think that's because the leak was repaired mid-July, so it wasn't repaired until the middle of the month, but obviously that usage was lower. The residential conservation target was also exceeded, and our residential customers in the prior month are now yielding a 42% conservation relative to the 3-year average. So these are really good numbers. They indicate that both the non-residential and the residential customers are achieving some fairly significant conservation, making some significant conservation efforts. If you'll remember, back in early 2021, we were working on trying to get to a 29 to 30% conservation across the board, and that's where we are today. So the combination of these numbers is about 37% when we looked at the production side of the water system, and announced that on Saturday. And we're going to show you some more of that in the next item on the agenda. But this is good information, I think, that helps articulate the distinctions within the non-residential category. And April, Mandy, and I, and Mark Rincon are available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. And thank you for providing this data on this item. I think it really informs the conversation. It's an inspiring report, a really good report from our community showing everybody working together. I'll open it up here to the council in just a moment, but I want to just recognize that while it has taken a while sort of to shift into gear, coming out of COVID, coming out of really an exhaustion of folks, not just locally, but everywhere, dealing with the really high stress emergency situations, and to be able to shift gears now into this and move into these types of numbers is really good to see. We know that there'll be a challenge, a corresponding revenue issue because of our incredible focus on conservation. That's going to be coming up. We don't want to get caught behind on that. I just want to make sure we make that marker. But at the same time, I want to just commend our community for stepping up and knowing we have a number of months here that are going to be very challenging before we even know what it looks like this winter. So it's going to be a test, a challenge moving forward. But I think we can feel proud of ourselves and knowing that we've stepped up together at this point. So with that, I'm going to open it to the council and see if there are any council comments here at this point. Seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I want to go back to the first part of the staff report on 11.1, where we're looking at the public, quasi-public uses, cemetery, churches, city-owned properties, and schools. There's some information and tables and some narrative discussion of what the penalties would look like if the required reduction were 10% or 25%. And I want to add a point of clarification, because I think this is really important if the council wishes to take any action or give staff direction at this time. We have, well, I'm going to back up. The reason I requested information about this category was it seemed clear to me that these uses included a number of properties with large green areas, potentially a lot of irrigation, both city, the schools, and some of the churches, and potentially even the cemeteries. The only non-residential part of our ordinance that addresses cutbacks and irrigation is a section that calls out dedicated irrigation accounts. And there is a formula for a mandatory reduction in that category of use, but it's a fairly complex formula, and it cannot be applied unless one knows the area under irrigation. There's simply no other way to use it. So one of the choices we have to make is whether we want to apply that same approach to other users who have, non-residential users who have a lot of landscaping or playing fields or whatever it might be set up for irrigation, or whether we want to take a different approach. What we have in front of us is a look at what happens if we simply say you need to cut back all your use by 25%. And the observation I'd like to share is that if we do that, we will be sweeping in some properties that have little or no irrigation with city water. So any approach we take has some challenges that we should keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council comment at this point? Vice Mayor Doring.
Yeah, thank you, staff, for presenting this information. It's very helpful for me in terms of getting a better feel for how our community is using water. On the point of dedicated irrigation accounts, I'm not sure if I'm ready to weigh in on any kind of change in the ordinance without more data on just that category itself. I need to get a better understanding of what those counts are, what they mean, who they are, ag, industrial. I really don't have a good feel for that. So I think going forward, more data there, just kind of doing a drill down of that category so it helps me better understand who we're talking about. Then I'll be in a better position to maybe think about some kind of changes to our ordinance with respect to the calculations there and how we drive down conservation. I want to get back to a point that Councilmember Hardy made at our last meeting. He specifically pointed to a couple of categories of high penalty users, and he focused in on 50 to 100% and 100% penalties. There were 15 in the 50 to 100%. There were 31, and this is non-residential, by the way, 31 in the 100%, over 100% category. We recognize that 13 of those, all of those were issued leak letters. I really need to, I think that's an area of focus that we need to really drill in on, and to Councilmember Hardy's earlier point with respect to bringing back some of the suggestions by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Belt. I think this is an area that we really need to focus in on in terms of our public relations and advocacy and interaction with those users. First of all, find out who they are, why they're going over, and what we can do to encourage them. Penalties encourage folks, but still, this is real. That was a really remarkable, shocking number to see there, or those two categories. So I commend the staff to maybe continue to bring back data, but maybe let's focus there. I think that this report probably should be included. I don't know how much, this may be a really time intensive kind of operation to create a report like this. I don't know if it is, so I may be speaking out of turn, but it would be nice to have this as sort of part of the monthly report that we get. Maybe that's asking for too much, and I'll pull back if this is too daunting for us. Maybe a more limited version of this, but it would be really good for the community to see this. And I just want to make I think as we go forward, I think just the general philosophy I have is we're all in this together. Let's resist the notion of, even though I want more data, I also don't want to have class warfare, and class as in user class warfare, where, oh, they're doing too much. They're not, what's being suggested by these numbers is that both, all of the classes are doing better. And I think maybe next month will be even better than this month. So I think this kind of data helps us in the equity argument. And I think as we refine this going forward, we're going to hopefully have even better news that conservation is happening with all users. But right now, I'd like to focus on what Councilmember Hardy focused on, those high penalty users, because that's a lot of water and a lot of usage, and maybe we can help them in their conservation efforts. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy and then Councilmember Chateau.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a couple of clarifying comments or observations. with respect to the dedicated irrigation accounts, our challenge there is we don't really have a way to apply the allocation formula that we have until someone has gone out and measured the areas. So there's, I think is it 40 accounts? It's a number like that, if I recall correctly, where there's a certain amount of work that has to be done before we can apply the ordinance we have. Now, it may be that that's a category where we're getting great conservation, and so that's not something real urgent, but I do think there's some value as we move forward in understanding what this ordinance is doing, what it isn't doing, where staff has an easy way to apply it and enforce it, and where they don't. And so, you know, the question on my mind is whether that approach we take in the dedicated irrigation accounts is one that we should take in other categories where there are large areas that are under irrigation. And that's just a question. I don't have a particular idea about that. I just see that, and this is true in residential too. We have an allocation per parcel, but we allow for additional water for larger properties. But the only way we can process a request for that additional water is if someone from staff comes out and confirms the area under irrigation. So we have an approach that we're using both in residential and non-residential categories that up front is very labor intensive for staff. And that is something we should at least keep in mind as we move forward. Do we want to stay with that or do we want to make a change? So that was my comment there. And then, you know, echoing previous comments from Mr. Prestwich and Vice Mayor Doring and Mayor Ellsworth as well. You know, the overall results are outstanding, and I'm delighted to see confirmation of what I expected, which is for the most part, everyone's pulling on the oars together, and the results show it, and they're wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say the results are really hopeful when I see these numbers and how much has been improved. And when I look at these numbers, I think that we could stick with what we're doing and just keep track of it and see if we can continue with these kind of numbers, and we're getting where we need to be. And I also think that the penalties were shocking for a lot of people, most people in the community. And that was the big wake up call. And people are now taking a lot of conservation action that they weren't before because of the financial implications and how much our water already cost, and now the penalties on top of it. So I'm very hopeful that we need to have some time for people to be absorbing that. And now they're making those changes and making them rapidly, and we're seeing it in the data.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the conversation between Lester and Paul. Is the intent there, Lester, that we literally need to measure the irrigation, basically the irrigated space on 40 separate parcels, and typically we would send staff out and walk it off and measure it? Is that what you're saying? Or you know, do we need to do that physically, or is this something that somebody could do by spending 20 or 30 minutes on Google Earth looking at those 40 accounts? There's plenty of measurement tools on Google Earth, in other words.
Well, you know, the only question I was raising initially is, do we want to apply the ordinance we have, which requires some form of measurement, or not? You know, in terms of methodology, I would think, Councilmember Hall, that the ideal arrangement would be to start with Google Earth or equivalent and put staff in a position where the confirmation with a site visit could be quick and not require a measuring tape.
Right.
That would be my own thought, but I'm not, I don't have any set ideas. The expectation certainly has been that it would take a lot of staff time to get it done. But I believe the city may already be, the city manager, Mark Presswich, is already in conversation with a GIS specialist who might make short work of it.
Yeah.
So yes, there are definitely some labor saving possibilities. Absolutely.
That would be great if so. My other follow-up comment is, Mandy, I think you built this. Love the data. It's terrific. If there's a way, just echoing Vice Mayor Doring's comment, we can build this into a regular monthly water report, even better. In fact, we have a forecast month by month of that water going out into the future. It'd be great to see each of these categories with the 3-year historic average number already built in on our new water emergency page that you've worked with Dr. Mitz to build, just so it's a static chart. And each month that we get data, we can just fill it in, and it becomes very clear for the whole community to see how are we doing category by category, month by month by month, as we march our way through this drought. That'd be wonderful to see, and it could be right there on that new website, which, by the way, looks terrific. Those are my only comments. When I first looked at it, I looked at the churches and thought, oh my gosh, some penance is due, until we backed out the leaks. So thank you for mentioning the leaks. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you much, and thanks to the community for really getting serious on the conservation. It's much appreciated. We all need it.
Thank you, and want to thank the council too. Really, the full council, the focus moving into this. It's a huge community effort. The staff has been tremendous, and the council as well. So to shift gears from one emergency into, we're in a bi-level emergency at the moment, and so to bring this focus is really incredible. Councilmember Hardy, over the last number of weeks, the focus, the sort of the heavy lifting at pushing on these numbers with staff is really appreciated, and the effort by staff in managing the community questions coming in has been remarkable as well, in keeping our community stable through this. Just as we have remained stable through the pandemic, so much is about communication and helping everybody understand, we're all together in this moving forward. So thank you. These next few months are going to be challenging because we don't know what's coming after them. So we want to recognize these excellent efforts, but also continue to look for ways that we can tighten as we move forward. So I'm in support of getting more data to look at where and what we can do as we move forward. I also, want to continue making sure to make that point that we're going to have a revenue issue, and we want to be in front of that as we look at conservation. That means less revenue coming in, and then keep the continuing conversation going. How potentially working regionally may bring benefits as we move through this. We don't know if it's going to be a wet or dry year, and so we want to look at all options for what's the best in keeping our stability here, both in our water supplies and also in the balance of our economy. They both work together. Water being a prime component of that equity in both our residents and our businesses. So I think we also want to ask, and both in my conversations with Vice Mayor Doring and Councilmember Hardy today, this idea of how can we be helpful to users who don't understand yet what we're trying to do, folks that may be going over or not really understanding what this sort of group effort is. How can we be helpful? And then also with those who have been really focused on doing things the right way, how can we sort of give some more incentive and benefit to those who are all pulling on these oars together? So that's where my thoughts are now that that if we get some more data and keep looking for opportunity, I'm in support of that. I wanted to ask a question of our city attorney. We had mentioned at the last meeting that the look at a potential ordinance about trucking of water out. Is that something that is coming back at some point related to this or separately?
We are planning on bringing something back. I'm having some folks in my office research that issue, and I'm not sure if it'll take the form of an ordinance, but we are going to address that issue specifically one way or the other. And that should come back hopefully at our next meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And so, Mr. Presswich, how do you feel about what the information you've gotten here?
It's helpful, and now it would be appropriate to receive public comment on this item.
Very good. Thank you. So I will open it now to public comment.
I see no public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. I have one more comment to make, and I'll see if there's anybody else on the council. As we get through harvest, we know that harvest is a challenging time for some of our larger winery entities, large water users. And so the next few months are going to be very telling and critical, and that we keep a very close eye as we move past harvest into more of our winter months. It may be appropriate at that point, to continue looking at these equity issues. We want to look at that throughout this whole stretch, but knowing that with harvest here, we're going to want to keep some flexibility and an eye on how we can, make sure everybody gets through this. And I just want to put the marker that as we move through it, that continued equitability conversation, I think, needs to be a part of it. And so are there any other comments from council? So seeing none.
I just wanted to say anecdotally, I got a flume, and I got an alert today on my phone as I was sitting in my office saying that my water had been running for the last 2 hours, very slowly. A hose, somebody left it slightly on, a hole in the hose, running at 0.4 gallons a minute. I called home, nobody home, so I went home and fixed the problem. So it was, well worth that little effort to get the flume. My wife and my child are very frustrated with me because I'm able to see exactly what kind of water use they have when I'm not around, and to their chagrin, we do have the flume. So it's a good program, but it could drive you crazy.
And we offered for our Saturday workshop a flume to the one of the folks on the call. Is that correct?
We did provide, we purchased a flume, and we used a random sampler, and we did have someone receive one of those. So I believe we presented the flume to them on Monday afternoon. Is that right, April?
Great. And perhaps we can keep looking for opportunities like that, incentives, those types of things that help us all work together. Okay, very good. So we'll now move on to item 12. This is 12.1, review and forecasting of city water supply availability. And this is Mr. Rincon, our Public Works Director.
Yes, good evening. Are we going to do a screen share for this, Mark or April? So we've been thinking about how do we present data, especially on Bell Canyon Reservoir, the storage available, trying to project out in the next 18 months, basically, on where we would stand on storage if we continue to meet our projected savings, water savings, consumption savings, and also looking at a 10-inch rainfall as the lowest recorded, so imagine if we get another extremely dry year, where would the reservoir sit? Well, the reservoir, as shown here, would sit okay. We wouldn't hit the rock bottom being 596 acre feet, which is a reserve for firefighting. So we don't want that top gray line to go below that. And if we continue to conserve as we have been and even exceed, we'll see that curve at a minimum flow along that line there. However, if we don't meet our flow target or our consumption targets, it could conceivably, we would stop producing water out of Bell Canyon. And just to show you too, that we did consider winter, we do get less consumption because there's less irrigation outdoors. So we estimated a 20% reduction November through February as a winter consumption. So that's our projection right now. You can see that the reservoir does not fill. We're looking at another dry year. It just steadily continues to be about one third full. That's approximately where it resides, and producing minimal water out of that reservoir for treatment. So we would depend on our other sources of water, namely our groundwater source primarily, and then filling the remainder of the demand with Napa water, and we'll fix that Napa water at 680 feet, as you know. So again, the bulk of the water produced, if we're projecting this and it holds true, the bulk of our water will have to come from the groundwater source. If there's any questions, I know Martine has been wonderful in developing this graph for us. We're trying to tweak it as we go along. So if there's any ideas you'd like to see on this, we're more than happy to accommodate. The water, even the monthly water report, has been tweaked a little bit too to kind of keep consistent units and show more information that's readily available at a glance. But Mayor, council members, if there's any comments on this, any questions, I would love to entertain your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Rincon. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy and Councilmember Hall.
Why don't you go ahead, Eric?
Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Mr. Rincon. So the available storage number there, that basically fluctuates from the top down to roughly this 808 level. So there's 15 to 1600 acre feet. Typically, if it was full, and I think we typically draw 750 to 800 acre feet per year. So right now our focus is on how do we conserve and hopefully refill this winter. But somewhere I think it'd be good to consider drawing down less of our capacity each year and moving this reservoir more to a reserve instead of a primary water source. Right now we draw down half of it, what's available every single year. So one dry year throws us right into an emergency in effect. So it would be great to find additional water sources so we can be in a position where we can have 4 or 5 years worth of drawdown in the reservoir in a reserve capacity should we go through an extended drought at some point in time. The other question I have is the 600 acre feet. I know that that's the reserve that we keep for not only fire, but I believe wildlife as well. And I think we're at some point going to look at some sort of survey to see, is there any sediment down there? But I was thinking we do have on our CIP list today, it's a $3 or $4 million project to work on the intake tower. And it dawned on me that dead pool down there where the intake tower functions, maybe the issue with the intake tower is sediment buildup more than anything. I don't know what the issue, what the issue is, but I wonder if sediment is part of it. That would be the first place it fills. So anyway, just an aside note there, I guess. But that's about it. I don't know if we actually have the 600 acre feet available to us. In other words, is what I'm saying. Maybe there's only 200 acre feet there, and there's 400 of sediment buildup from 65 years of runoff on the hillsides there. So anything, one good thing to look at some point. Anyway, thank you very much. I love the new charts. Lots of good work already in 17 days. So I really appreciate it. Thank you much.
Councilmember Hardy. Thank you, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I have some questions for Mr. Rincon, and my question is, looking at the chart that shows how the reservoir levels play out over time, what are the assumptions? I know you said something about this, but what assumptions are we making about water used from other sources?
For sure, we're maxing out our allotment from Napa water. So we're using the city of Napa's water at full capacity.
Is that at 600 acre feet then?
That's correct, 600
Okay.
acre feet.
Thank you.
And yet to be negotiated whether we can get more on a seasonal basis. But for now, we are looking at maxing that out and even making up for lost water this past fiscal year.
And what about the wells? What assumption do we make about demand on the municipal wells?
Well, the demand on the municipal wells would meet the balance for demand. And of course, the demand, the consumption is assumed to be 37% during peak months and 20% during our winter months.
Well, then do you not have a number for the acre feet drawn from the city wells?
I don't have that in front of me. That's something we can calculate and have a separate report on that as well.
We may
540 acre feet, Lester. That's what it works out to. Sorry, we use typically about 1,900 acre feet as a city. So if you reduce that by 37 to 40%, you take 600 off that, it leaves us with about 540 that must come from Stonebridge.
We may have the answer to that question, and Martine is on the call as well. I believe we were allocating 450 acre feet of Stonebridge well water. Martine, is that accurate in this analysis?
That is correct, Mark. 450 for the Stonebridge wells and 600 for City of Napa. And it's on a baseline of a 37% reduction, and basing it off of the average, we're anywhere from 1,600 acres feet to 1,700 within the last 5 fiscal years for water produced.
And so without the conservation efforts sustained, we would need more water out of the reservoirs to help meet demand. So what we're trying to do is optimize the other sources as Mr. Rincon explained.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Appreciate
I'm
it.
seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Just in terms of additional supply, I was just wondering, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the flood control district meeting coming up on the 17th. My understanding there's perhaps a conversation happening there between Napa County and Solano to sort of reactivate the conversation about accessing Berryessa water. And I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that, and that hopefully if that comes up, that you fight your hardest to help push that and ensure that there's an intertie at some point between Berryessa and Solano that the valley can benefit from over time.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something that I made sure that City Manager Mark Prestwich is looped in on. That way we're coming at it both from the elected and staff perspective. It's a board that has a good regional dialogue, and I'm optimistic that whatever opportunities are out there, this board has the capability to work together towards. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's, I think, a real opportunity both for St. Helena and the other jurisdictions in Napa County to push forward a dialogue that may not have been happening, in the past. And this could be a doorway for us. And I think we're really fortunate to have Mr. Prestwich engaged on that as well, just as with the pandemic, his ability to sort of work cross jurisdictionally and regionally is a real asset.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other council comments? So I have a question in terms of groundwater. I know that's a challenging, again, dialogue between county and municipalities. Are we identifying any additional potential for wells that might serve the city in a either long-term capacity or in an emergency capacity, so that we have some potential backup in maybe less sensitive areas than the Stonebridge wells?
I did have a conversation with private residents who has a long agreement with the city to help provide water if the city's in a crisis like we are today. That well hasn't been looked at in a couple of decades, perhaps more, and it sounds like it's effectively non-functioning today. So what I did not do is suggest that maybe the city comes out and primes the pump, if you will, and services the drill or services the borehole, and see if we can't reactivate that on city's dime instead of the private landowner. But maybe that's the next step there, and I can follow up offline with Mr. Prestwich on that.
I think that's a important conversation to look at those potentials. So I'm certainly supportive of taking a look at that and what a process might look like, and a couple of different options if others are out there as well, so that we're looking at a kind of one might not work, but another might. So I'm supportive of looking at those aspects too. Also keeping in mind we need to be sensitive on our groundwater pumping issues with the river, with the county, et cetera. So with that in mind, I do think looking for those opportunities is important. So with that, I also think that this graph is tremendous. We're really getting the ability now to calculate where we are in the middle of this. It's like a dashboard in a vehicle. We're able to get data now and see where we are. So from the previous item, the data presented there, really helpful, and here as well. So with that, I think I've opened public comment on this, but I just want to double check.
You did.
I haven't. I did?
You did.
Well,
I did. Okay, very good. So this is our last item. So if there's any other council comment, seeing none, what I'll say is that as we move forward, this is going to be a challenge over the next 3 months. We've shown now we can all work together. That was a really great report tonight, but we are deep in a water emergency and a shortage. And so let's continue to work together and support each other in our critical needs, and, be sensitive to each other as we move through COVID, we move through this situation. Really appreciate all the community, the council, the staff, everybody pulling together. So thank you very much. And we'll see you at the next meeting.
You. Good night,
City
all.
Attorney, Ethan? Did you hear him call for public comment?
Oh,
I think you did.
I thought he did.
Why don't I do it?
Why don't you just confirm, Mayor, that you did? I thought you did, but
we may have drawn in from the last one. Shall we just do it again just in case?
yeah, just check.
I'll open the public comment and see if we have any hands come up. And I'm seeing
No hands are raised.
Okay, very good. So with that,
Thank
we'll
you.
close public comment. And once again, thank everybody for the focus and all the good work, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Hey, good night.
Thank you.